Natalie, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's just get right into it. All right. For people that don't know who you are, have never seen your face, have never, you know, grazed on your profiles over the internet. Tell people a little bit more about who you are, what you do, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. I'm pretty much really only known on Bitcoin Twitter. I am a former journalist. I'm a Bitcoin podcast host, and I also travel the world now and I speak about Bitcoin. I educate people on Bitcoin. And it's really been the most fulfilling new career transition because I spent more than 10 years as a broadcast journalist and I covered everything. I was an investigative journalist, an anchor, a breaking news correspondent, learned a lot. And primarily I've acquired some communication skills. And so now I'm translating those to Bitcoin because really what this space needs is the message to be simplified because so many people out there don't understand Bitcoin. They're intimidated by it. They're skeptical. And I can relate because that's how I felt about Bitcoin too.
Okay. So yeah, a lot to get into. Let's just start with Bitcoin and we'll make it super simple. If you've been living under a rock, what is Bitcoin?
Sure. So Bitcoin is a decentralized digital currency, and it is the best savings technology that has ever been invented. So Bitcoin is actually an open protocol. It is code that anyone can look at. It's completely transparent. And most people might be familiar with the word blockchain. And what blockchain refers to is a distributed public ledger. So if you and I were exchanging value, if we were making a transaction, we might record it on a ledger, right? That I paid you X amount for whatever good you sold me. And we might keep track of that, right? And for most of the world, the companies hold their own ledgers. They're private, they're centralized. Well, in this case, Bitcoin is a decentralized distributed ledger around the world where we have computer networks that are literally posted up in all different parts of the globe, and they broadcast that ledger to one another and consistently update it. And through a consensus mechanism, they verify the transactions and make sure that everything is accurate and that no one is double spending their Bitcoin and everything is, right as it should be. And so because of that, it's truly a decentralized computer network in the same way that the internet is decentralized. There's no one that owns the internet. There's no headquarters. There's no CEO. There's no country in charge. Bitcoin is the same way. So many people think of it as sort of the internet of money. And why did I say it's one of the most important savings technologies that has ever existed? Well, Bitcoin is a store of value in that if you invest in Bitcoin and if you hold it for at least 4 years, no one has ever invested in Bitcoin held for 4 years and lost money. So over the last 13 years that it's been in existence, it's appreciated about 1,000,000%, and it has outperformed every other asset. So, most people invest in stocks, or maybe you're a gold bug, you invested in gold. If you did, you actually lost money. But it is just a great form of investing. And it's something that we really need right now because with inflation, we're losing money. If you hold it in the bank right now, you get 0.001% interest. You're actually seeing your money melt away like an ice cube. And Bitcoin's trying to fix that problem because it sort of addressed the issue that has been created with money being concentrated with the hands of few people and in the central authorities, the central bank, which can manipulate and expand the supply. And Bitcoin wants to fix that by decentralizing it, making sure that no one controls it and making sure that there's only a scarce finite supply. So there's only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoins. So that's kind of a broad overview, but basically Bitcoin is a digital asset and it's a great savings technology.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. And so there's like a million different things that you could have went into. Why Bitcoin specifically?
Yeah. So I guess I would, talk about my background as an immigrant. I'm first generation here. I moved here when I was 5 with my family who fled Eastern Europe because my parents grew up in communism. And so they know what it's like to live under a very oppressive regime where there's no sense of social mobility or economic opportunity. So they came here for the American dream. And America once represented a place where if you work really hard, you could achieve the American dream rather easily, right? It's kind of simple. You work hard, you put in the hours, and you're able to afford at least a house, kind of that middle class Americana lifestyle. And I feel like every single decade, it's become so much harder and the goalpost keeps moving. And we saw so much of the financial system unravel in 08, 09 because there was so much irresponsible risk that banks were allowed to take and that government policy basically did nothing to stop. And so my family actually lost everything in the financial crisis. They moved here in the 90s, worked really hard to be able to afford their first house, and then lost everything and went bankrupt in the crash, like so many millions of Americans. And I think that planted a seed in me because I felt like, wow, the system is rigged, and it causes the average person who's a hard worker and just came here to just, pay taxes, be a good person, and work hard. And somehow they're left holding the bag for all these big corporations and big banks. And there's something really unfair about that. That doesn't represent economic opportunity or freedom and the values our country was built on. So I had this frustration and this feeling like the system is unfair or rigged somehow, but I didn't understand how. And in 2017, I discovered Bitcoin. I had friends that were investors in the space, and I was totally skeptical, like most people are. I thought it's gambling or like a stock. I could potentially lose all the money. I didn't understand it to be a powerful technology network, and I didn't understand why it was even created and how it's different from all the other cryptocurrencies. So when I finally did the homework, I realized that Bitcoin is trying to address the very problem that essentially created the financial crisis and the bubble that we've seen after it. It's trying to address the problem with the concentration of political and economic power in the hands of the few, who basically get to socialize their losses and privatize their gains. And life is getting harder and more expensive for the average person because we have these massive bubbles in equities and assets, and the average person can't afford these assets at this point. And then we basically crush the income earners, the savers, the middle class. And I think it's led to a lot of polarization and division in our country. And this is what happens when currencies basically start to get debased and fall and empires fall. So I saw Bitcoin as sort of this life raft, and it's very different from the other cryptocurrencies because it's not a security. It is a form of digital property. It has already been recognized by regulators as such. And I think that it could usher in a more fair and egalitarian financial order that's based on value and based on supply and demand and real interest rates, all of which have been manipulated by our current system. So Bitcoin I see as a refuge, as a hope, a line of hope that we can maybe have a renaissance of the American dream, which is so core to my family and my background.
Right. No, that's incredible. So what is the ideal person that invests in Bitcoin strategy? What should be their strategy? Do you buy it and just never see it and give it away when you're dead? Or do you flip it? If somebody's a go-getter and they want to make money and they want to make money in crypto, are they day trading it? Because I know a lot of people that if I tell them just buy Bitcoin, keep it forever and give it to their children, they say, why would I do that? I'll be dead.
Yeah.
So what is the point of a store of value if you never spend it?
Yeah. So, there are people that trade Bitcoin, but I advise against that because I see this as a savings technology, as I mentioned. So this offers you the ability to plan for your future. And as you look at the logarithmic chart and sort of zoom out, you see that the asset is just going up and up and up in value. Yes, it's in the short term, it's very volatile, but look at our US dollar. It's very stable in the short term. And yet the purchasing power is basically collapsing. It's lost 95% of its purchasing power since the Federal Reserve was established in 1914. So you really have to compare it to the different assets out there. And I see it as something you purchase and then hold for at least 4 years. You don't want to put anything in there that you'd want to spend in the next 4 years because of the volatility. And really, you could potentially see massive gains. I mean, on average, the mean appreciation for Bitcoin has been about 93% a year, which is incredible. I mean, that definitely outpaces the S&P 500 and many of the biggest stocks. And I think that in the future world, if we go on the Bitcoin standard, people will be taking loans out against their Bitcoin. We're actually seeing it right now. One of the biggest headlines that happened recently was Goldman Sachs actually allowing for someone to put up their Bitcoin as collateral for a cash loan, which has never happened from a legacy financial institution before. It's only happened really in the crypto market. So I think that people will be using Bitcoin to take loans out against it because as it appreciates in value, think about it, like you won't necessarily even have to pay back your loan if the asset goes up in value, which is kind of a cool thing that Michael Saylor has said in interviews before. But really, I just envision a world where people are able to save for the future. Right now, we are in debt. We are a consumerism-driven nation where everyone is just encouraged to take out mortgages, go into credit card debt. We have student loan debt that they're now talking about trying to forgive. We are a debtor nation. And that's really sad because it doesn't allow us to plan for the future very easily, especially with the asset bubbles that are created in equities and housing. And so my goal is to educate people on Bitcoin so that they think of it as a savings technology where they purchase and they hold, they don't trade it, they don't sell it, and they allow themselves to, actually have their money that they work so hard for in their regular jobs maintain an increase in value as opposed to the opposite right now is which is collapsing value due to inflation.
Yeah, I love Michael Saylor. He's awesome. Did you watch the
Yeah.
Lex Friedman podcast?
Yes. Yes.
Oh,
I watch every Michael Saylor interview. I love him.
he's amazing. Have you met him in person?
Yeah, he's actually my most popular episode on my podcast.
Oh,
So
nice.
he's the most downloaded episode to this day. And I've had the chance to have dinner with him, and he's amazing. He's awesome.
That's amazing. Is he in Florida? Is he South Florida?
He splits his time. He does have a place in Miami Beach. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I never asked you. Are you in Florida?
I'm not. No, I'm in the LA area.
Oh, you're LA. Okay, I'm in Florida. So that's what I was
nice.
asking.
What city?
Tampa. So Tampa Bay.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love Clearwater Beach.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Clearwater is nice. Tampa is it's more famous now because of Tom Brady, but Tampa has been the underground gem for sure. I used to live in LA.
I love it there. That's cool.
Yeah, I used to live in LA, and people would be like, "Oh yeah, where are you from? Florida? Oh, Miami, right? Jacksonville? I'm like, no, Tampa. Orlando? No, Tampa. What's Tampa?" And then now everyone knows Tampa. But side note, irrelevant. But yeah, Michael Saylor he's amazing. How would you, anyone that hasn't listened to the Lex Friedman podcast with Michael Saylor, I highly recommend it. It was one of my favorites that he's done, and he's interviewed Elon Musk 3 times. So, how would you put? Well, I guess a lot of people lump crypto as crypto, right? So they'll lump in Ethereum or Polkadot and Cardano and Bitcoin all together. But people that are more in depth, obviously with everything, right? There's layers to it. And then there's people that are in the game, but on totally different sides. But from an outside looking in, they just, Bitcoin, Ethereum, same stuff, which it's not. It's not even close to the same stuff. There's Bitcoin Maximus, there's Ethereum Maximus. There's people that only trust Ethereum. There's people that don't trust Ethereum or Bitcoin. They're invested in other things.
Yeah.
But just in crypto as a whole, right? And we can use just Bitcoin as an example. How would you stack up in real life? Like not on paper or theoretical or philosophical, but in real life, like a real person that is getting older and wants to have a better quality life. Not in 200 years when Bitcoin is $10 million a coin, right? Like today. Would you recommend that you would put money into cryptocurrency over real estate, seeing how you can own the asset, but also make money via Airbnb or rent the property, and then basically they're paying your mortgage off? What would you say to stack up against that? Because for me, real estate, I own tons of Bitcoin and Ethereum, disclaimer, but we also have a lot of real estate. And if I never sell Bitcoin, then my family will be rich. But as far as me living in the present right now, any condo that we have can make 10 to 15 grand a month, just Airbnb, and that's cash. And then I can buy more Bitcoin, right? So what would you recommend to someone that's on a limited budget, and how would you stack up real estate versus Bitcoin specifically?
Yeah, I mean, passive income's great, right? So real estate is a fantastic investment. However, I do want to caution people that right now it appears that we have another bubble. Maybe it's not as large as it was in 2008, 2009, but it's not sustainable for the real estate market to go up about 20% a year. So if you look at the Schiller index and you look at the appreciation, I'm sure there are a lot of real estate agents out there that have been making a killing over the last 2 years as so much liquidity was pumped into the economy, but that's not sustainable. And right now, home sales are already starting to slow down as mortgage rates are going up. So I would be really careful, because I don't know if any of that is going to come tumbling. I mean, people are, I think, all expecting a recession, and they're watching the Fed and seeing what they're going to do with interest rates. I think a lot of people still love to diversify, and they like to have a little bit of action in real estate and a little bit in stocks, a little bit in maybe cryptocurrencies. And I think it just depends on someone's risk tolerance. For one, I see Bitcoin as one of the least risky assets, because again, I know that it's decentralized. I trust the technology because of all the homework I've done into it. And I also know it's scarce. So it's really like purchasing real estate in cyberspace, as a lot of the Bitcoiners have said. It's a plot of land that is in cyberspace, and they're only ever going to be 21 million, and you can own a full plot or you can own a fraction of a plot. So, I think it's really powerful in that way, and it can't be debased. Some people have compared it to, purchasing land in New York in like the early 1900s. So I think it's really interesting that people are speculating on the real estate market right now and what's going to happen with it. Perhaps it's going to go up and up as they continue to money print. But with Bitcoin, I just think that it's like the long-term safety net. I think it's the life raft from all of the money printing and these bubbles that have been created that I really hope, people don't lose money on. I know they will. I'm worried for pension funds right now and people that have really put a lot into stocks. And as for the other cryptocurrencies, I am a big believer in free markets. Again, like, what is your risk tolerance? If you want to invest in certain stocks or invest in certain tokens, perhaps you'll make a ton of profit, but also you risk that they will fall. I mean, some of them, I believe some of the tokens will actually go to zero. They will be deemed securities by regulators because that is what they are. Whereas Bitcoin has already been universally accepted as digital property. So it's very different. And I know that it all gets lumped into the same umbrella of crypto, but truly Bitcoin is different than all the other tokens. So if someone wants to invest, like, all power to them. I hope they make money. I hope they don't lose money. But the reality is both are going to happen. And I don't know, which ones are going to be the winners or losers. So I just focus on Bitcoin because I do think it's going to be the winner.
Right. Well, but what would you say? Because you can only yield so much, right? You have to have to make it, unless you're yielding yourself, right? If you put your money into Celsius or Voyager or whatever, you're making 6% on your Bitcoin, which is pretty low. It's high compared to banking, but it's pretty low compared to real estate, right? So if you have a condo that costs $500,000, 500,000, you paid for it in cash or you got a loan, and then you can per month you can Airbnb it and make 10 to 15,000. You're good. So if you were to do the percentages, it's much higher than 6%, like not even close, right? So what would you say about, yes, the real estate agents for sure, they're making money now that it's not sustainable. People that are flipping houses, not sustainable. People that are selling their house that they've owned for a long time, not sustainable. But everyone needs a place to live, and people will always go on vacation even if they're broke. I don't know how they do it, but they will. People spend money, and especially, for instance, with my situation living in Florida, people want to come here. They want to see Tom Brady play. It's downtown, right in the center. So you're always going to Airbnb it. Even during a recession, people are going to come down. And if you don't want to Airbnb, you can always rent it out, right? And then you still own the asset. So you're kind of like you're kind of using the building, like, here you go, and you're pawning it off, but you still own it, which is obviously how a lot of people have generated wealth. I think Neil Patel said real estate is how dumb people get rich. And I thought that was pretty funny. It's like smart people get rich from technology, dumb people get rich from real estate. So anyone that's in real estate that became wealthy, no judgment. But
well, I mean, it's true that real estate has created a ton of wealth, and that is the result of sort of the inflationary monetary policy that we've had going for decades. But what's sad about that is, on the one hand, cool, we have people who have real estate that has gone up, 20, 30, 100% over however many years, or they can rent it out as properties and rent is going up. But let's peel back the layers of what's actually happening with society, right? Because in the 1970s, you could have a home that you purchase here in Venice, California for like 60, 70,000, and wages have not been able to keep up with the pace of the inflation of assets. So now today, that same home is 1.5 million. And how do you expect someone, Michael Saylor talked about this with Lex in his interview. It's like, how do you expect someone that's starting their career to purchase a house, to be able to have an asset that will hopefully go up in value? And so we live in this skewed time where we feel like, oh, there should be deflation in some areas because of electronics. My electronics get cheaper and I can afford this, but then my house should go up 20%. And then so how do you get wages to keep up with that? It's just our whole economy is skewed. And if you are fortunate enough to be a land or a business or a building owner, then you're going to benefit from inflationary policy. But at the same time, there's going to be booms and busts because bubbles can't keep inflating without at some point popping. And so to think that the real estate market is not going to come down at some point, rents won't come down, the home values won't come down, that's probably being a little bit short-sighted and not recognizing what's happened in history. So I think real estate is a fantastic, and I would love to have my own house that I make my own. But also, I want to recognize that our current system has made it very difficult for the majority of Americans to own a home and to be new home buyers. And we encourage so much debt that we're never going to be able to pay off. I mean, over the last about a decade, we've created hundreds of trillions of debt in order to spur about tens of trillions in growth in GDP. So we're basically just like borrowing and spending and kicking the can and the tab down the road to future generations with no plan on how we could pay it back, because at this point we can never pay it back. And I really think that leads to a breakdown of society, because when the average person no longer has hope for the future, that they can afford that house, afford education and housing and food and shelter for their families, you start to get, uprisings, you start to get populism, you start to have people point the finger and try to find blame, and politicians come in and take advantage of that and say, well, it's the corporate greed, it's the CEO, it's this, it's that. Meanwhile, the problem has been their policies and encouraging this system of very easy debt. So I know that that's kind of like spinning off on a tangent, but like if you have real estate, fantastic. I would be cautious that it may go down in value if we hit a recession and the bubble pops a little bit. But at the same time, you're right. People always need a home. People are going to want Airbnbs, and that's fantastic. And I think in the future, there's going to be more and more people using Bitcoin as collateral to purchase homes, which, is great too. So I think that there's a lot of movement, and I think there's going to be a lot of shaking out of the system that we see over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I think we both can agree that, because I'm more so coming at it from an investor point of view, right? And a lot of people that listen to the show are entrepreneurs, investors, right? But we can all agree that the consumers are getting screwed.
Yeah.
They're the ones that are getting screwed, no matter what. It doesn't matter if it's real estate, stocks, doesn't matter. Crypto, doesn't matter. The people that are living paycheck to paycheck, that are consuming, not providing. Like if you consume content versus provide content, you're the ones that are getting, those are the people that are getting screwed over, regardless of what you own.
Completely. And again, we have politicians who then come out and they want to put rent caps, right? They want to do like, they want to put in these policies that are almost prohibitive and punishing like landlords and building owners as if they're the problem. And again, they're not the problem. The free market would probably regulate this a lot more. And, it's just sad to see how much of a bubble we've created and how we're between a rock and a hard place, because now the Fed can't raise interest rates significantly and the market's sort of doing it itself and bonds are selling off. But if they keep printing money, we're going to go to 20% inflation. I guess that's really great for anyone who does have real estate or assets, right? We're going to see more and more inflation in the market, but really this is tearing apart our society. And I think it's just going to lead to more and more division. And I don't want to see that, because my parents came here for the American dream. Like I want the idea of a strong middle class and access to opportunity, and the possibility that you can move up in social classes and it's not just rigged against you, which I really truly feel the system is right now rigged against the working person.
Yeah, I think there's definitely people that made the laws back in the day, and then people that have progressively made new laws definitely make laws for themselves, obviously, right? Nancy Pelosi makes what, $400,000 a year, but worth $200 million. How does that work? You don't have to be Sherlock Holmes to figure out that mystery. But I understand, because at most 99.999% of the population, if they're in control and they're in power, they're going to be biased. People are biased. I'm biased about a lot of things. I'm sure you're biased about a lot of things too. That's just human nature, right? It takes even people that are optimistic, they still have biased tendencies if you study psychology. So, but having said that, I still think America's relatively good compared to other countries. Would you agree? Because even though there might be income inequality, there might be, specific classes of people have a much higher chance, everyone still has a chance. Whereas in other countries, you don't have a chance at all.
No, I completely agree with you. I mean, other countries have inflation rates that are 50 or 80%. Their
Yeah.
currencies are actually collapsing in real time, or they live under oppressive regimes. But I don't think that we should pat ourselves on the back and just say, well, it's better in America. So, we're sailing, because unfortunately
Mhm.
our quality of life is deteriorating as we speak. And we're really putting a spotlight on the fact that the US dollar is actually losing its power and monopoly over the world as the global reserve currency because of how much we've sort of bastardized and manipulated the system. So, we could say that America is a better place to live than certain places right now, but what direction is it heading in? Right now, I actually just did a news hit on Fox News talking about how 401k, you can now allocate some Bitcoin to your 401k later this year with Fidelity. And the truth of the matter is that more than 50% of Americans are not financially prepared for retirement. About half have actually had to dip into their retirement savings early, many of them as the result of the
Mhm.
pandemic. And a third of Americans don't even have a retirement account. And so we're all going into debt. The cost of living's more. How are people going to afford to retire? Social Security's not going to pay for it, and that's a big
Mhm.
Ponzi scheme as it is. So yes, America's a better place to live than other places, but we are
Mhm.
also really causing the quality of life and the purchasing power of the dollar to collapse in real time, and people are getting
Right.
frustrated. And that's why we see, the division. And I think you're pegged as like you're left or you're right and you're this and you're
Yeah.
that, because people feel frustrated and they want to place blame somewhere. And unfortunately, they need to place blame on the system.
Don't you think there's a aspect of it though that if we look at history and you go back 200 years, the quality of life of everyone is drastically better, right? People used to die at 30, and that was the lifespan was 30, 35. Now average lifespan is 75 to 80.
Mhm.
Hopefully in the next 50 years we'll live to 110, 120, 100, and who knows, right? Some people
Mhm.
like Peter Attia that have like offshore labs in Belize that are, working on these longevity
Mhm.
stuff, stem cell and exosomes, all these different technologies, which is like, I'm super excited because 95% of the people that I interview are scientists, technologists, doctors.
Mhm.
Um, but don't you think that eventually there comes a time where you kind of have to take responsibility for yourself? And if you look at history, seeing how far we've come, we're always going to be looking at what we don't have if we always feel bad for ourselves. Does that make sense? Like
Absolutely.
my
And
great great
mhm.
grandparents, if they lived today, as bad as people make it seem, and have as bad as people whine, my great parents would be ecstatic.
Mhm.
They, well, my great grandparents were in. They were adults during the Great Depression with the Nazi regime and
Mhm.
all that stuff, and they were poor and they were immigrants that came over from Italy, Ireland, and Israel, and
Mhm.
they would say this life is amazing. What are you talking about? And then now this is what we became used to, and now moving forward, it's like, well, yeah, but it's not perfect. But let's say if in 50 years it gets even better than today, and it's like this is the Great Depression in that framework, but now it's 50 years better, and we're a more evolved, elevated society. But it's still not perfect, right? Eventually, you have to
Mhm.
draw the line of life is pretty good regardless, and a lot of it is how you make life in your reality. I know that some of the richest people that complain all day, and I know some of the poorest people that are super happy, and it's all in your mind. So eventually, I understand and I get people they start at different lines, but eventually you have to look at life and take ownership for yourself.
Oh, completely. Absolutely. I think that's core to capitalism, and why I think Bitcoin having the opportunity to maybe equalize and regulate the system in terms of
Hmm.
providing sort of a reset, it really encourages that type of self-determination, freedom, and really providing value and allowing the free market to be a referee and judge that value. But I think one of the things that you're really referring to is the conveniences that happen when technology improves, because at the end of the day, many of the things you're talking about, the result of a better lifestyle, is just because of technology improvements. One of my favorite things that I've read about Bitcoin in the Bitcoin Standard, which is my favorite book in the space, I highly recommend everyone read it, especially if they're new to
Who's
the space. The
who?
Bitcoin
Who's the
Standard
author?
by Saifedean Ammous. He's a
Okay.
brilliant engineer and economist, and he breaks down the history of our financial system. And he talks about many of the things that we take for granted today, whether it be plumbing or like fertilizers or like the things that allowed us to power our homes and have the type of infrastructure that we really rely on today, is because we were on the gold standard for a very long time. And we had a form of money that could not be easily manipulated or debased because it was backed by something scarce. And so the banks and the government was essentially limited in how much they could spend because you had to be able to exchange the fiat, the paper money, for gold. And we went off the gold standard, which caused a lot of the problems. So he talks in his book about the idea of the difference between 0 to 1 in technology and 1 to many. So 0 to 1 is the hardest because it's basically, it takes the most capital, it takes the most innovation, it takes the most risk for you to literally invent a new technology, like people invented the telegram or the printing press or whatever it may be. But then to go from 1 to many is just an issue of scaling and marketing, and it's much, much easier. So many of the things that we really take for granted were created, invented, built on the gold standard. And now through technology, because technology advances and it's inherently deflationary, it allows for advancements to happen quicker. It makes certain things in our lives easier. But what I want to, kind of argue back is that we should be in a system that's capitalistic where, you bring value to the table, you're willing to work hard, your destiny is yours to make. But what about a system where basically because they're printing money, now that money is going to the big banks and the big corporations, they're able to take out loans that they can leverage to purchase more assets and grow their wealth. And meanwhile, the average person's getting crushed because their income's not keeping up. And now all of a sudden we have a system that is creating a wealth divide and wealth concentration here at the expense of everybody else. And now you no longer have capitalism. You have crony capitalism where people suck up to the politicians. You have rent-seeking moral hazards. And then these guys, there's no consequence. They bail them out. It's completely rigged and unfair. And so that's why I'm super passionate, because I totally agree with you. Your destiny should be your own. You have to take responsibility for what you bring to the table and the economic opportunities that you pursue. But our system right now, because we have nothing backing our money and our money is not scarce, it's just expanding in supply, it doesn't allow for that sort of economic opportunity like it once did unless you are advantaged.
True. Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. 100%. Well, what would you say about the access to technology and information versus before the computer, or I would even say before YouTube? Prior to 2005, and really YouTube didn't become that, valuable until I would say 2009, 2010. If you took someone from the 1800s and gave them access to this information, wouldn't you say, well, okay, sure, maybe it is rigged. Maybe it's grown farther across, right? But back in the 1800s, you didn't know anything. You literally had no choice. You had to figure something out and take a risk, or you had to get hired to work your way up. Now with the access to information and technology, anyone could be an entrepreneur. It takes 5 minutes to start an LLC. And if you really don't want to be an employee and you really want to get out of your life, well, Google it, YouTube it, go into different things. It's not that hard. However, I know that some people don't start at the same line, whether that's with, intellect or family history or whatever. So I feel that, but I just think that the access we have to technology today, we can make excuses all day long, but there's no excuse. If my great grandfather had YouTube, we would be right there with the Rothschilds. So,
Well, I do think that things like YouTube are incredible. And the fact that we're in this digital information age, in the future, I think education will be free. It technically is. I mean, the fact that people are paying, 60 grand a year for a college degree, I think is almost silly at this point. I think it works for certain trades and certain skills, or maybe certain degrees like a medical degree. But for many degrees, I think it's completely a waste of money at this point. You can learn a lot of the same information online. I think that's really powerful. But, to say that just the average person who has no capital and comes from just a background that isn't fortunate or doesn't have any access or connections, it's not very easy to acquire capital. And that's what you really need in order to start a business. Capital is essential. And unfortunately, we have a system right now where if you go to a bank, you're going to get a loan much easier if you're a big guy, the big fish, as opposed to a small fish. And small business owners are really the fabric of what built up the middle class. And that's why I really support a system where there are fewer taxes and fewer regulations that are crushing small business owners, because we need them to have access to money in order to start their businesses and to pursue their entrepreneurial, endeavors, as opposed to just allowing that money and that capital to pool with the companies that already exist. So yes, I agree with you that there's, YouTube and all of that, but it's not as easy, in my opinion, as it was before in order to gain access to capital, unless you're sort of
Mm.
a big fish and a big player. And I think that's why so many people have dissolved into saying, okay, I'm just going to work for this big corporation and I'm going to be okay with my salary and my 401k plan. And you almost become like a corporate slave. And a lot of people are
Mm.
unhappy at their jobs because it's so hard to just start your own business and, have that sort of capital and take that risk on when you really don't know what's going to happen in a system where everything's getting more and more expensive.
But don't you think, just to play devil's advocate here, don't you think that there's more like internet entrepreneurs today that, like, to me, I feel like there's more rich 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds than there's ever been. When I talk to my grandparents when they were alive, and then when I talk to other people's grandparents and their parents, it doesn't compute. When I try talking to them about Bitcoin, and I try talking to them about e-commerce and Shopify and all these things to make money and systematic businesses, cash flow businesses, that you can regulate and have going while you're sleeping, it just doesn't compute, because their idea is working at a textile factory, working your way up, or working for Sony or whoever. So wouldn't you say though that the corporate work your way up and put in the work, that was more in the past, and we have more millionaires and billionaires today because of technology? I mean, would you agree with that?
Well, what I would point to is the fact that today, 5% of Americans hold 2/3 of the wealth of the country. And three of those Americans are Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, and Jeff Bezos, who have basically half of the wealth, just the three of them. So yes, maybe there are more millionaires, but clearly more people have fallen out of the middle class and out of the upper class than we are creating. So we're creating a few billionaires and a small amount of people who probably hit headlines, right? If you're young and if you took off in a technology company, or if you made a bunch of money on meme coins or, GameStop or whatever, yeah, certainly you'll be spotlighted and you'll be highlighted. But what's happened to the rest of America? Because we used to be, the middle class used to make up the majority of our society. And now that has fallen to less than half. So that makes me really, really sad to hear, because again, like I don't think that a system that is purporting to be capitalistic and, oh, we have all this technology, well, then how come we're concentrating the wealth at the top and exacerbating the problems on the middle class and low income? That's an issue to me.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And it's kind of, for me, it's hard to relate, because I never had any, like, my parents didn't have any money, and it got to the point where I was like, I slept in my car for 2 weeks in LA. And
I love
I never
that.
got a bank.
Like,
I've never had a bank loan in my
Yeah.
life, right? And now,
Mhm.
7-8 years later, it's drastically different. So I have a very, uh,
Yeah.
very different theory of, listen, like, I know it's going to be hard and it's not what you want to hear, but
Mhm.
everything is possible if you actually use your resources, you stay away from bad stuff, and you focus your time. It's just
Mhm.
like Michael Saylor with his, like, 10 commandments, right? I
Yeah.
have those 10 commandments that he said on Lex Friedman. I have them as my background to my phone, and I have them in my second brain, my Notion account.
Mhm.
And I literally have that, and I read it every day when I wake up. It's like, guard your time,
Uh,
guard your time, guard your friends,
yeah.
all this stuff, upgrade the world, stay curious, but also constructive. And I think that a lot of what we're capable of is inside, and we're always looking for other people to do stuff. We're always looking to network and stuff. But I'm sorry to tell you, but no one's going to make Natalie rich except for Natalie. No one's going to get Justin
Mhm.
wealthy except for Justin. And that's just how it works. And I feel that the faster you accept that,
Mhm.
the faster you'll get out of the subpar category of financial wealth, and then you can, move up in the economic class.
Mhm.
Otherwise, you're always going to be looking for other people to do things for you, besides
Mhm.
taking the responsibility on yourself. And this is like what I try to impart on my little sister, and I try to impart this on my little brother.
Yeah.
So I have a very hardcore view, because I literally had no one help me. So,
Mhm.
but I do understand that some people literally are not capable as well. Like, some people have different genetics. Like, a lot of my uncles and aunts, they're like mathematicians and they went to good schools and stuff. So I understand that maybe I have a genetic disposition to be smarter than the average person, right? Doesn't mean that I'm guaranteed to be wealthy. I could still be a loser,
Yeah.
but it puts me in a better position than other people. And I understand that, because genetics are a real thing. And so is environment, how you grow up. I grew up in a very terrible neighborhood, but there's probably worse neighborhoods for sure. So
Mm-hmm.
One of my best friends, he's from Jamaica, and he says, listen, the one thing about America is, yes, you have a better chance if you're in this class or you hang out with these types of people, but everyone's got a freaking shot. Every single one. He
Mm-hmm.
said, in Jamaica, no one's got a shot. You either are with the right crew or you're born into it or not. And so I think a lot of people, they look down at society, but I'm the opposite. I'm as you can tell, I'm an optimist. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
really a pessimist. Like, oh, we're all doomed. I look at it like there's so much opportunity, and what we have today versus 200 years ago. If we showed someone 200 years ago the iPhone, they would think we're aliens.
Mm-hmm.
You know, have you ever taken
Absolutely.
a plane and you look down and you see the
Mm-hmm.
cities and the little minions driving in their cars? You're like,
Yeah.
human beings are amazing. Like, it's just
Yeah.
incredible. I'm flying in a cylinder in
I
the
know.
sky.
I know. Well, again, I
So
mean, that's the power of technology. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Look, I think you and I have a lot in common because the same. I come from a background of a lot of financial insecurity. And so I had this
Hmm.
drive inside that I really needed to change my life. But I also, I have to admit, I feel like every year the goalpost has changed. It's gotten harder and harder because everything around me gets more expensive. I definitely thought I would graduate from college
Hmm.
and, be privy to a job that existed before that paid a certain amount. And instead, because of inflation or because of the economic crash, everything's actually going down. My income's going down, but the cost of housing's going up. So, like,
Hmm.
how do you bridge that gap? And it does become harder and harder every single year. And I think it does take that sort of like spirit and guts and perseverance and
Hmm.
persistence in order to make it, especially today. But, I also think that hope is a really powerful it's a really powerful mentality, and I think a lot of people have lost hope, and that's one of the problems. Like I think Bitcoin, one of the reasons why I've become so passionate about it is because it gives me hope for the future. And I think that when people are in dire economic straits, and you're right, people have different levels of intelligence or different backgrounds and environments that they grew up in because their parents were working to make their
Hmm.
lives secure.
Yep.
People, I think, lose hope, and when you lose hope, you're not able to plan for the future, and you start to think, well, maybe I'm not going to have kids, or maybe I'm just going to give up, or I'll just go down this path that I know is stable, like going down a corporation. And people, we really have to look at human psychology. People exist out of like fear and wanting
Hmm.
to basically stay in their comfort zone, and it takes that extra initiative to really break out. Some of us can do it, others it's a little bit harder, and I'm sure both of us have been in situations where it's like, do I take the risk? I don't know.
I don't know. I always
Those
risk
are
it. I always put it all on black.
That's
Let's
good.
go.
No, I
I
love
risk it.
that.
We're
But
either getting rich or we're getting broke. That's how it works over here.
yeah, but no, I think you're right that we're lucky in the sense that technology has really empowered a lot, and so there is a lot of opportunity, and especially with a piece of technology that potentially could allow people to accumulate wealth and not have to
Hmm.
worry so much and not put it in a place where they have to become day traders on the side. They're like, today the world we live in, this is how I see it because of the monetization of society. It's like you're a hairdresser, and that used to be enough in the 1970s to like afford your mortgage and afford your
Hmm.
kids and all that. Today, you're a hairdresser, and then you moonlight as a day trader or an options trader at night. Or you're an accountant, but you're also a portfolio manager for yourself because it's like your
Hmm.
money is not enough. Money is not enough, and you get
Yeah.
taxed more and more. And like it should not be this hard to save your money, and savings is so critical to society. And really, we've gone away from that.
Yeah. No, I mean, for employees specifically, it's hard. Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
it's hard. I haven't been an employee in almost 10 years. So it's hard for me to view it from that point of view. And a lot of people that
Yeah.
listen to the show are not employees. They're entrepreneurs, like, those type of people. But yeah,
That's
I
great.
think, as seeing it from that side, it definitely is hard, and you need the right guidance, right? But that's the same way with everything, right? You need the right
Mm-hmm.
guidance. You need to be in the right group of people, not even just for money. Just, you don't want to hang around with a bunch of dirtbags because they're going to
Mm-hmm.
bring a lot of stuff into your life. They're going to start doing drugs. You
Mm-hmm.
don't want to be around drug addicts, right? That has nothing to do with
Mm-hmm.
money. And maybe if you're spending money on that stuff, right? But that's just going to
Yeah.
deteriorate your health. You want to hang out with people that are, optimal and pushing and providing. That's why I always try to say, listen, I know a lot of people complain and stuff, but like in my companies, there's no complaining. It's like, don't come to
Mm-hmm.
me with whining. It's, if we have a problem, we fix it and we'll talk about the
Mm-hmm.
solution. And if you
Mm-hmm.
if you want to talk about it, we can talk about it. And I think that's a
Right.
better definitely a better approach. Because if you look at life
Right.
as like, oh my God, I cannot believe I'm talking to you through a computer screen with wires and Wi-Fi and signals
Mm-hmm.
and electrical engineering that was programmed, that we have no idea how this computer works. Like this computer,
Mm-hmm.
if smoke started coming out of the back of this
Yeah.
computer, I would have no idea what's going
Mm-hmm.
on, right?
Yeah.
I'd be like, how do I
Yeah.
fix it? It's done. The computer's broken. I have to bring it to an expert that understands how to build monitors. So
Mm-hmm.
just the fact that I can talk to you in real time, I try to view it that way, because it's really easy to look at the negatives. But even in a perfect
Mm-hmm.
world, you can look at the negatives, and even in a terrible world, you can look at the positives. So I just
Mm-hmm.
choose the positive route. But yes, I definitely think that it's it's definitely inevitable. You definitely
Mm-hmm.
need to save, and I think Bitcoin will provide hope with that. How do people educate themselves and really comprehend that they need to put their money in, let's just say, assets in general?
Yeah, so let's start with the education front, because I think
Mm-hmm.
that that's so critical and crucial. You almost have to unlearn what you know, because in schools we're taught one economic theory, and we're not taught it as theory, we're taught it as fact. And that's the
Mm-hmm.
Keynesian economic theory, which is that government spending and inflation is good. But most people don't know that there's actually a contradictory theory known as the Austrian school, which basically is the foundation of capitalism. It talks about how, well, saving is actually good and deflation is good. And it's something that we should be seeing in society, and be seeing our money go up in value. So, there's a comparison that needs to be made, and you have to take the time to understand that. There are many amazing books out there. For me, what got me started on the journey and ultimately sparked my transition out of standard mainstream news into this Bitcoin path is The Bitcoin Standard by Saifedean Ammous. He also has a follow-up book he released just this year called The Fiat Standard, where he really digs into the financial system and how it's impacted the issues that we see in our food industry, our healthcare, how it's impacted small business owners, and just he really peels back the layers on everything that has happened as the result of fiat and central banking. I really also love the book Bullish Case for Bitcoin by Vijay Boyapati. It's just a really well-written, crystallized view of why Bitcoin's important and why he's bullish on the technology in the future. And then the last book I'll point to, because we've kind of hit on some of the topics, is a book called The Price of Tomorrow by Jeff Booth, which talks about how, again, this kind of idea that technology is advancing at a rapid pace. It is literally
Mm-hmm.
doubling very, very, very quickly. And technology is inherently deflationary. That's why the first phones that came out were huge and they were very expensive, and TVs were once very expensive, and today they're very, very cheap. Well, so if technology should be making things easier, and it will continue to with AI and self-driving cars and all of that, then why aren't we working less, and why isn't our money worth more? Well, we have inflation in one area because of all the government printing and the government spending. We have inflation in the assets and equities, but we have technology driving deflation. And those two forces are coming together, and that can create a crisis, because again, people can't afford those assets, and yet
Mm-hmm.
they're working harder and harder at jobs that are making them less and less. So it's an interesting time period that we're in. And I think education is super, super critical. And I forgot what your second question was. But
Well,
I
basically,
really,
what I'm trying to get people to understand is, I know I talk to a lot of people that just save their money, and for
yeah,
whatever reason, they've been brainwashed into thinking just save, save, save. Which every smart person that I know and that is
yeah,
financially secure, they barely have any cash. It's all in
yeah,
assets, whether that's in
yep,
crypto, stocks, or real estate, because those grow and cash deflates. Right? You don't want to have
yes.
something that's going negative. You want to have something that's going positive, and that's not just
Mm-hmm.
Bitcoin. That's just anything that appreciates in value. You
Yeah.
know. Um,
Yeah, no, I agree. I
but how
mean,
do
the
you get
only
that
way,
average person to comprehend that?
yeah, you're right. And that's the big challenge, because I did not realize until I learned about Bitcoin that not only is our financial literacy completely lacking in this country, because I didn't learn about this when I was in school, and I went to very good
Mhm.
schools and I was a very good student, did not learn about Austrian economics and really the foundation of some of these theories. But really just the sense that, look, more than 50% of Americans do not have assets. So
Mm.
something is clearly going wrong. I don't know if I mean, obviously they're becoming less and less affordable, but if more than half of Americans don't have assets, then there's a huge gap. And thank God for things like YouTube and these books that are out there. And hope, I mean, this is one of my missions, is to really educate people, because that is the only way that you will create wealth. If you just put it in the bank, it's going to melt away. It's a melting ice cube. The air is going to, rush out of the tire. So you need something that's like a life raft. And especially in a time where inflation is ramping up and becoming more and more aggressive as the result of certain monetary policies. So, I don't know all the answers. I personally think that our education needs a little bit of an overhaul. But I think that is one of the biggest messages, is this is a very powerful digital asset, Bitcoin, the one that I obviously educate people on, and assets are the way that you're going to make money, so something that's scarce, that just, that can't just be manipulated and created at whim. I think that that's really important for building wealth and being able to take care of your family. And that education is really lacking in this country.
Right. No, absolutely. How much cash should somebody own? Like if you have $1 million to your name, someone goes, here you go. You have no money, but they give you $1 million. How much would you recommend that the average Joe puts into assets versus having for, oh shit, I got to pay for this, or oh crap, I got to pay for that? Because I know a lot of people that they put all their money into assets and then they're like, oh shit, I got to cash out because I ran out of cash. So how much would you say? Now, this is not financial advice, guys. I want to make that clear. This is not financial advice. But if you were to tell yourself what to do, what would you tell yourself?
Okay, well, this is a very interesting question that I haven't been asked, but because everyone has different levels of expenses and how they're looking to invest. But here's what I will say: I think that you're asking that question in a very interesting macroeconomic environment. So I would have a different answer if our situation was a little bit different. And what I mean by that is more money rushed into equities in the last year than in the last 17 years combined. So like I will say right now, I fervently believe that we have a bubble. We have a bubble that I think is right now taking tumbles, and we see a lot of volatility in the market. So would I put $1 million in equities or stocks? Hell no. Normally, I wouldn't say to have that much cash, because I just think cash is trash, right? It's just losing value, and that's it. But I do believe that things will come down harder. And so the reason why the answer to the question is interesting is actually I would have some cash right now, like powder, ready to deploy when things really come tumbling down, and when the Fed is backed into a corner and literally loses all credibility because they can't hike interest rates like they claim to in order to tackle inflation, and it just runs away from them. I think that we're going to see more red candles in the market. I think that is also going to impact Bitcoin, at least in the short term, because Bitcoin is largely lived in a QE environment, largely driven by liquidity, correlated with equity. So I think that Bitcoin could come down, but hey, what a great buying opportunity. I mean, some of the biggest fortunes have been made in recessions and in these downturns where people have a bunch of money to deploy and then see those go back up. In the 90s, people who invested in Amazon after it tanked 90%, those people are probably very, very happy, right? So it's one of the best times to invest. So normally I wouldn't say to have cash, but at the same time, if I was given $1 million right now, I would definitely have a huge chunk in cash so that when everything takes a dump, I would deploy it.
Yeah. So would you put 800,000 in Bitcoin and then have 100,000 sitting around?
Oh, I would definitely put more than 50% in Bitcoin. I would tell you that. Maybe I'd put a little
500,000. So 500,000 into Bitcoin, and now you have
At
500,000 cash. Would you throw some on Amazon or Tesla, or would you just keep the cash ready for the downfall?
I would wait. No, I would wait for the downfall. I would put more. I would put like 800,000 into Bitcoin, and then I would maybe sit with 200 and wait for the thing to take a tumble. Here's the funny thing: I do think that Bitcoin's going to come down if and when we do have a recession. I do think that things are going to come down at some point. I just don't think it's going to come down as hard as it did in March 2020 when we saw it go down to like 3,800. I just don't see it because I think people will rush in and there's going to be a bottom that's much higher than that.
3,800.
But could it be in the 20s? Oh my gosh, if it was 3,800, I'd be so happy though. On the same, I'd be like, oh, I'm buying all of it. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, I do. I mean, people argue this. Actually, I find these conversations fascinating. The Bitcoiners in the space that talk about, bond yields and all of that. Like I don't believe they can keep inflating the bubble without it popping at some point, and then rushing in with more money printing and just like sending the thing going. And I think we could have like a melt up when they print money. I think we could have hyper Bitcoinization where we like sail past 100,000, because they can't let the system fail. They've already showed us in 2008, 2009, they're going to like bail people out. They're going to rush in and send people checks and all of it. Next is going to be UBI, and they're going to deploy it, probably the central bank digital currencies, to like just inject money directly to people and claim that they're the saviors. All that is going to send this stuff running. So we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. No, I totally agree. What is your take on Ethereum? What I'll tell you, with me, if there's one thing I've learned is if you invest into somebody or a company that is ran by somebody, make sure that that person is a genius. And I would say that I'm decently intellectual person. I'm a decent intellectual. When I listen to Vitalik Buterin talk, I have to focus. Usually I can listen to 4 different things. I'm sidetracked over here. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. When Vitalik talks, I have to like literally stare them in the eyes, like I'm staring you in the eyes right now, and listen to him talk. And the second I heard him on the Lex Friedman podcast, I was like, that's it. I'm done. And I started looking into Ethereum, and I understand it. So the biggest financial advice that I could give to myself was invest in geniuses, right? Tesla, Amazon, Ethereum. So my point is, what is your take on Ethereum as a whole, and what's your take on Vitalik?
I don't know too much about Vitalik, and I don't want to, say anything negative about Ethereum, because again, I do believe in free markets, but I don't personally invest in Ethereum because of a couple of reasons. Number one, it's ultimately a centralized entity. So the decisions of a few make up the destiny, and they've had issues in the past, and I don't inherently trust it. So I worry that in the future, there's going to be a time where I'm going to have to time the market and get out. And like, I am going to have to spend my time figuring out when that moment is to sell. So I don't want to worry about it. I acknowledge that there are a lot of people that are excited about the idea of building on top of cryptocurrency, building on top of these like smart contracts and having things like NFTs. Not my personal passion, but I get why there are other people who really want to expand and innovate in this space. But ultimately, I'm just going to give you a user experience. When I did at one point experiment with Ethereum, the fact that a transaction, or me wanting to send, let's say, 1 Ethereum to someone would cost me 1.5 Ethereum to send it. And I'm exaggerating, but like the amount of fees that are on it. Yeah. I mean, I don't understand how that's sustainable. And I know that they're working on that, but also, proof of stake kind of reinvents in a way our current system. It's based, like, if you have more, you're able to verify and mine more. And so I think it kind of disadvantages people, whereas Bitcoin, like proof of work and the mining is not, it's not like that. It completely turns fiat on its head, and it changes the incentive programs. So for me, Ethereum's just not the best investment.
Isn't ETH 2 converting over?
It's converting to, ETH is converting over to proof of stake from proof of
stake. Yeah.
Yeah. It's people don't realize that it's actually proof of work right now, but it's converting to proof of stake. And then I talk to people who are in the crypto space, and some of them like are managing some of these crypto companies, and they're really bullish on things taking over Ethereum. They talk about things like Solana because of faster transactions and more bandwidth and all this stuff. So, it's, again, like, I don't want to spend all this time researching to try to time it and figure it out. And what if something does take it over? Whereas I know with Bitcoin, completely different. I look at it as a form of digital real estate. I don't see it as a risky asset. I don't see it as a security, obviously, because it's not. So that's one of the reasons why I'm not in the Ethereum game, but to the best to everybody who is,
Hey, listen, if you don't want to actually study the thing, then just invest in geniuses. That's my advice. What would you say about different governments banning Bitcoin? I know that there was something in New York recently, and I don't want to talk about any current events because I want this podcast to stand the test of time.
Sure.
But what's your take on the future of banning? Because I'll give you my 2 cents. My 2 cents is they're not going to, because there's a lot of politicians that are invested in Bitcoin. So why would you write laws that are going to counteract your personal investments? So
sure.
That's my theory. I don't think it's going to happen because people that are in power are invested that don't tell you.
Yep. Yep. So, well, let's reinforce the first point that like Bitcoin cannot be banned in the same way the internet can't be banned. So ultimately you can try,
Mhm.
but you cannot ban. And actually, most people don't realize that even though China banned Bitcoin mining, there's still a significant amount of Bitcoin mining that's happening under the radar
Mhm.
there. So again, they're not able to fully stop it. As far as politicians, that not only in the U.S. but also we see this in Europe, they're coming out against proof of work and they're making very false claims about climate narratives, energy consumption, all of that are not well researched and don't provide any context. They're trying to promote proof of stake. Well, I always say to people, especially from my journalism background, follow the money. Who is in their ears and who is telling them to promote this form of mining and verification as opposed to the other? But ultimately, I agree with you. I think Bitcoin's going to win because the numbers will speak for itself. The statistics, the data will speak for itself. And I think that it needs to be more education when it comes to our policymakers. I think that there will be, Bitcoiners, more and more of them in
Mhm.
office. And there are a lot of people that are dedicating their time right now to call up the legislators and make sure that, not only are they asking the question, hey, are you well versed in this? Or what is your stance on things like Bitcoin, but also just trying to educate them. There's a group of people that I love in the Bitcoin space. They came together and wrote a book. They like did a book sprint. I don't know if you've heard of this, but where basically you lock yourself in a room or in a couple of rooms for a weekend, and you literally write a book over the course of a weekend or a week. They wrote something called Bitcoin and the American Dream, and they've been handing it out to policymakers. And it comes from the vantage point of this is an apolitical technology. You don't politicize it because that would be silly. It provides financial inclusion, it provides economic opportunity, and they're trying to get the message out to politicians to make the right decision. But we will still see those people that are clinging on to the legacy system, and maybe they have banks whispering in their ear. We've got the Elizabeth Warrens who just like will not listen to sound reason. She won't even open her ears and open her door to talk to people in the space, which is sad. But that's why we have to get some of these people out of office because
Mhm.
they're way too old and they've done nothing but make money themselves, and the country has basically gone in the other direction. So we need to get them out of office, and we need
Well,
people who understand the space to get in.
yeah. How do we keep the lawmakers up to date with technology if people that are in technology can barely keep up?
Well, look, I mean, they have staffs that are responsible for exactly this. And I think that Bitcoin is going to be an increasingly big issue. It's going to be a voter issue. It's going to be an issue of financial inclusion and economic opportunity and jobs. I mean, look at Texas with the power opportunities,
Mhm.
energy grid, all of that. So I think they're going to have to listen. And I think that they will. The problem is that Bitcoin does take time. And I will say that that's one of the things that's one of the reasons why I'm very understanding and sympathetic to people who are very new and skeptical, because I was there when I heard about it in 2017. I was like, this thing is super risky. It's going to go to zero. It's all like digital. I
Mhm.
can't trust it. But that's
Wait, you
because I
can't
didn't
touch it.
understand it.
It's make
Trust
believe. You
it. Yeah.
can't.
Yeah.
You can't touch it.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not like
And so
gold.
I relate. I
Yeah.
get it. But then you study it, right? And then it's like, I made that comparison earlier of like it's the internet of money. I don't know
Mhm.
exactly how the internet was coded, right? But I can appreciate the incredible value that it creates for everybody's life around the world. And I also can acknowledge, and I know that there's no one that owns the internet and can ban it and can just shut it down across the whole world. It's impossible unless like we basically
Mhm.
have the apocalypse. You're not going to shut the internet down in all places at the same time because there's no central point of failure. And Bitcoin is the same way. So I'm really encouraged by the politicians that have done their homework, but there's still a lot more that need
But
to be educated.
most politicians like they don't leave office until they either die or they're 95 years old. So there's a lot of 50-year-old politicians that we still have another 40 years.
I
So how's
know.
that going to work out? There's
I don't
no
know, but
way. I
I'm
know 50-year-old people. There's no way they're going to spend time learning cryptocurrencies. I can barely get a person my age to understand it that's not motivated. There's no
well,
chance
Mr.
I'm getting a
Optimist.
55-year-old.
Oh, hey, Mr. Optimist. I'm actually more
Oh,
optimistic than you
I see
on
what you
this.
did there. I
I
see what you
really
did
am.
there.
No, I think that they'll have to pay attention because look at the news and what we
Mhm.
hear, the developments that are happening every single year. I mean, now Elon Musk, who just bought Twitter, Elon Musk is a Bitcoiner. He
Yeah.
has it on the balance sheet of his companies. Major corporations are going in. Goldman Sachs, massive bank,
Hmm.
issuing a collateralized Bitcoin loan. Fidelity, largest 401k provider in the country, offering access to Bitcoin. I mean, so these are the companies and brands that they already pay attention to. So if those start getting in the Bitcoin space, politicians will have to pay attention. So I'm
Hmm.
actually I'm not worried about it. And people talk about, oh, are you worried about regulation? Da, da, da. I think if you're in cryptocurrencies and you're in the other altcoins and tokens, yeah, you should be worried in terms of when Gary Gensler comes down, throws the gavel down and says these are securities, which, I don't think it's going to change that much. It might affect them temporarily, but look, they're going to be like stocks. They're going to be regulated more. The
Hmm.
exchanges will have certain rules that they follow, and there's a certain amount of risk that investors need to know they're taking. But Bitcoin's going to be digital property and potentially maybe in the future legal tender. I don't know. We'll see if we get there. But yeah, I'm really not worried about policy makers. I think they're going to make
Yeah.
the right decision because they'll be forced to.
Yeah. And again, there's a lot of people that are invested that make the
Yeah.
laws and run the show too.
Yeah.
So it's not like everyone that's in policy only owns
Mm-hmm.
stocks or has cash or real estate. Like,
Yep.
no, a lot of these people have Bitcoin.
Yes.
Don't be
50 million
fooled.
Americans. Yep. 50
Yeah,
million Americans
don't
right
be
now have
fooled.
Bitcoin. Yeah.
My last question for you is outside of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, and really outside of human life in general. Um, why why are we why are we here? What is the meaning of life? Well, after this is all done and Natalie's gone, and you have Bitcoin goes to 10 million, and you own 300 Bitcoins, what was it all for in your eyes? Like,
Well, that
what
is
is our purpose
very,
as Homo sapiens? What is our purpose on this earth?
yeah, well, that is a very deep, deep, deep question. I think that our
This
purpose
isn't
in
Fox
life.
News.
Yeah. Fox Business News doesn't ask me this question. I don't know.
Well, I know you're more
I
than just Bitcoin. You're a very intelligent person, and
thank you.
obviously you know finance through and through. But the road doesn't stop there.
No, I really like this question because believe it or not, I think about this a lot.
Yeah.
And I'll share a more personal thing in a bit, but really I think that the purpose of life is to create a better life for the next generation. Like we are made to procreate, right? We're not meant to
Hmm.
just be here and use up the resources and then pass on. We're meant to build families and build connections and to pass on the things that we learn and we grow, and the next generation has it better hopefully, and the next generation has it better. And I think that the purpose of life is to make it better for the next generation that comes. And I think it's beautiful and it's more fulfilling when you do feel like you're giving back. Something's improving around you, namely your family and the people you really care about and love. And I think that that's where we can derive a lot of fulfillment and happiness. The world is a beautiful place with lots of different things to see and mostly things to learn. Like, I'm a lifelong learner. I'm so grateful that my parents, if they instilled me with one thing other than like working hard, it's just this love of learning. I want to learn about people and places and
Same.
things and
Yep.
history. And I think we learn from history in order to become better. So that's what I think the ultimate purpose is. But if I'm going to get even more personal, like am a faith driven person. Like, I have faith. I believe that there's something more beyond this. And I have sometimes thought about Bitcoin as something that's truly divine, because we've gotten to a point in society where I was always an optimist, and I always looked at the best in people. And in my stories, I would always drive for like the human element, the thing that connects us, the universal human experience that we all tap into, and why I think we love storytelling, right? And I was
Hmm.
starting to just lose hope and starting to look at the future like, well, wow, we're just going into a direction that's more and more divided. And how are we going to fix this? And how are we going to, get
Hmm.
ourselves out of all this debt? And everyone's scared of having children. And I just felt like there's a breakdown of society. And then Bitcoin, I feel like it's like a gift to humanity in some way, that through technology and through something that no one controls, we have a way to almost rebuild a better system, and one that does
Hmm.
provide hope for a lot of people. And for me, that's like a mission. That's a hill I want to die on. Like, if it offers that hope and it's based on something that is programmed, and it's just math at the end of the day. It just is what it is, and we can embrace it and build a new financial order that's more inclusive. I think that that's amazing, and it's
Hmm.
incredibly powerful and inspiring, and it makes me really excited about the idea of a future, and having a family and providing for a family. So
Yeah. As I get older, it's harder and harder for me to like have small talk with people because My
Yeah.
level for BS is just so low. It's like
Yeah.
non-existent.
Yeah.
I want
No,
to
I
talk about
feel
stuff
you.
that's going to move the needle, move society forward, upgrade the world. Shout out to Michael Saylor. And when you're just
Hmm.
talking about your normal day-to-day problems and your normal day-to-day life, or about your normal human stuff, to
Yeah.
me, it's very hard for me to connect with you at this point. When I was younger,
Hmm.
obviously in my early 20s and stuff, but now I just it's very difficult for me to
Hmm.
talk to you about like surface level things. It's just like, oh,
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I agree with you, and I have to say that I love young people in the sense that like this is the next generation, this is the energy, and they
mm,
have different technology, and I'm like fascinated by young people. I teach at USC, and I love my younger students, and they're so curious and hungry, and they come from these different backgrounds. But at the same time, I have to be honest with you, I look at the generations that are coming up and I feel sorry for them because they're so stuck in their phones, and they're like they have these some people have these narcissistic tendencies of just like,
mm,
putting too much out there with social media in a way that's just to get attention. And I worry about that. And I feel like, we need something that's going to fix that and be more inserting more value into society, more values, because I think we've lost that. And I know that this is probably going to sound crazy to you, but I really think that when you have a system that kind of feels broken and the
mhm,
money's broken, I think it encourages that type of behavior because it just encourages just
mm,
outlets where people want attention and they feel like they value is not placed on things like family and education and these things. It's almost based on like the easy fame or the easy million or the easy whatever. And I
right.
don't like that. Like I truly believe in that saying. You've probably heard it that um, hard times create
Yep.
strong
Yep.
men create hard or easy times, and easy times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. And that's like the phase we're in. We had
Mhm.
great men who created easy times, and these easy times created weak men, and now those people had children. Like when I see them stuck in their phones and taking all those selfies and like being ridiculous on TikTok, I'm like, oh no.
I know. Yeah, TikTok is pretty bad. Yeah. Yeah. No, it is hard. Sometimes I look at life and I think of all the people that have died for us and all the great pioneers, the Benjamin Franklins and the Albert
Yeah.
Einsteins and all the people that have paved the way. And you're going to take this life for granted. They literally,
Yeah.
like Isaac Newton, changed how we live, and you're just
Hmm.
going to be all about yourself. But
Yeah.
being about yourself is a survival mechanism, and to in order to change that, it's going to be drastically hard because that's hardwired into our DNA, right? Like our purpose in life, not mentally or physiological, but our actual purpose is to reproduce, die, reproduce, die, reproduce, die, right?
Yeah, but at
So
the
the
same time,
problem
if you
is when you have those things that are hardwired in your DNA,
mhm.
is, well, in order to stay alive, you kind of have to be out for yourself. And it takes someone really evolved and really optimistic to be like, no, that's not what it's all about. It's about, saving this person or helping these people move
Mhm.
forward. And that's what really makes me happy. But it's going to be hard as talking about the masses to change that, because that selfishness is hardwired into our DNA, because the selfish people and narcissistic people, they lived longer if we're looking at medieval times in the past history. So it's going to be very hard to change our primordial instincts. But I also think that you can hack the system too as well. So
Yeah, well, I definitely think, technology has kind of hacked us and brought out those sides in us. But I will say, I don't know if you
mm,
referred to it or not, but the book Sapiens really talks
yeah,
about sort
great
of,
book.
the history of how we evolved. And it makes me think of the part where they talk about how we were able to evolve in this way and this quickly because of our collaboration and our collaborative nature, and the
Mm,
fact that we are social, and we inherently, like, if we build communities and connections, we actually prosper and create more abundance for
oh
everybody.
yeah.
So yes, we are driven by self-interest, and there's selfish sides to us, but I also think like that human nature is also to connect and build together, and that's where we see true growth. So
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I completely agree. Well, Natalie, I think you're awesome. I think you're super intelligent. I love what you're doing.
thank
I
you.
love that you're a Bitcoin maximalist. How do people reach out to
Thank you.
you if they want to get in
Thanks.
contact with you, or they want to view your stuff? What's the best way to get to know you and reach out to you?
I really appreciate it. Well, this has been really great. I'm really grateful to come on your show and hope we can stay connected. I have a
Of course.
podcast called Coin Stories where I have conversations about Bitcoin and economics and all these big picture issues. And it's called Coin Stories. It's available on all the podcast platforms as well as YouTube. You can follow me on Twitter. I tweet a lot, and I primarily focus my day on monitoring my Twitter. It's at Nat Brunell. And I have a website called talkingbitcoin.com, and you can reach out to me there.
Wow, that's amazing. And guys, all the show notes below will have the descriptions and everything. All right. All right. Well, that's it. Any last words before we end this thing, Natalie?
No, just thank you so much. And I hope everyone takes a moment to go down the rabbit hole and learn more about Bitcoin.
Absolutely. All right, guys, you heard it here, folks. This is the Justin Caviar Show, and we are out. Bye-bye, y'all.